Hello, crafties. Thanks for tuning in with me again this week. As the title says, we are going to be working on hats, and if you have been following me for any amount of time, first of all, thank you so much for supporting me, but also, every year I set up like a Keebler elf and I make a lot of hats to donate to local charities. So if you're in the St. Louis area, look for the handmade hats with the black ICC label on it and feel free to take some pictures, post them on Instagram, tag me, let me know that my stuff is out there and that it's making a difference. So without further ado, we're going to head into the tutorial. Alright, so let's jump right in. Today we're going to be making our chunky hat. Here I have a Fashion Plus skein of yarn, and it is about a 5 weight, so a chunky yarn, not super bulky, not jumbo. The thing is with these, if you've ever been to Joann's, they will have a clearance bin with bundles of yarn in it, and they're like $4.99, somewhere in there. But this is a acrylic polyester mixed yarn, but they do have different wools or other fibers in there, so you just have to kind of scope that out for yourself. So I found my middle string, and my favorite, if you watched my tutorial on working in the round, you would know that my favorite way of working up a hat is to use the magic circle. So here I have my hook, which is a size K in the USA or a 10.5 size, but really it's just a 6.5 millimeter. This one just looks rather big to me, but I am going to also need scissors and a yarn needle. I usually prefer the metal needles, but these large plastic ones work very well with thicker yarn. So we're going to get started. I am going to wrap my yarn around my finger and make my magic circle. And I'm going to yarn over, pull up that loop, and I am going to chain 2. Now the reason I'm chaining 2 is because the yarn is thicker than per se red heart, so I don't have to chain as high, otherwise the stitches are going to look way too tall. So now I am going to be making double crochets. I'm going to make 12 in my magic circle, and this chain of 2 does count as a double crochet, so I've technically already made 1. So I'm just going to yarn over and make my second double crochet. And if you're unfamiliar with double crochets, I recommend that you go back to the double crochet tutorial I have on my channel under beginner tutorials so that you can follow along easier. So that's 3, 4, and I like to wait till I have a few stitches in my magic ring just before I let it go, because otherwise it kind of warps and messes up. It's 5, 6, 7, 8, and as I get closer to 12, I'm just going to keep pulling it more, like closed. 9, 10, 11, 12, and I'm just going to go ahead and pull that string pretty tight, and that cinches close my magic circle, and I am going to find the top of this chain 2, which is here, and insert my hook, and I'm going to make a slip stitch. And I'm going to weave in my tail as I go, but feel free to let it hang. I just find that by doing it that way, it keeps the magic circle from wiggling out. And then if you're working with a fiber aside from acrylic, so say wool, wool is very particular when you are working it, and it's very hard to pull it back. So I don't really worry about my strings pulling out with wool yarn. In fact, I don't even use fray check with my wool yarns just because of the nature of the fabric, or the fiber rather. So what I'm going to do is yarn over, and I am going to insert my hook right here where I just made the slip stitch. And again, that chain 2 counts as a double crochet, but I'm going to make another double crochet in that same hole. So again, if you were with me for my working in the round tutorial, this is called an increase, and we are going to be increasing in each stitch around. So you should end the row with 24 stitches, and I'm going to do that now. So I'm also looking for recommendations or suggestions on videos. I also take requests on tutorials. I like covering different subjects to the best of my abilities, so still feel free to hit me up or DM me and let me know what you want to see made or what you want to learn how to make, because I am more than happy to do that for you guys. Cool. And the thing I like about these particular skeins is that, well, for one, finding that center string is not difficult. Some brands, some skeins, it's very hard to find that center string and get them started, and then they just give you grief throughout the entire skein, and you're just, by the end of that skein, you're just tired of working with that color or that brand. But if you're making a large project, you're kind of stuck. So that's one thing, but this is a very smooth acrylic. It pulls very easily from the center, and I absolutely adore it. Almost there. Alright, and we're to the end of this row. I'm just going to do a quick stitch count, because you see here, sometimes you have this little guy right here. Sometimes we call it a false stitch, but basically it's not a stitch and it can throw off your stitch count. So you're going to want to make sure that you have your 24 stitches. Counting is always important when it comes to crocheting. So I have the 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22. So that is a stitch. So I'm just going to yarn over and go into it. 1 and 2. Alright, and I'm going to close the row off by going into the top of this chain 2 from the beginning and making a slip stitch. Now, there are other ways of closing your rows, and I will often alternate between those two methods. I do have a method that I prefer more because it does hide a seam line. If you've made a hat before and you had this horrible seam going through it, then you know what I'm talking about. So actually, I just want to show you guys really quickly, going back into the top of that chain 2. I'm going to pull up my loop like I'm going to do a slip stitch, but I'm really making like a single crochet basically, and then I chain 1 on top of that, and this eliminates the seam throughout the whole project. So if you ever see me doing a tutorial where I'm joining things in the round, that is typically how I do it. Unless it's like a sweater or something, then I might actually use the slip stitch. So I'm gonna snip this tail up at the top. I don't need it, it's not gonna wiggle out because it's woven in there already, and these fibers catch pretty well, I'm noticing. So yeah, I don't have to worry about that ever coming out, ever. It's not wiggling apart. So what I'm gonna do now is, this counts as a stitch, this joining right here. We're gonna be increasing again. So we're not gonna go into the base of this joining, but we're gonna go into the next stitch, and we are going to make a double crochet increase. So we're gonna put 2 stitches there. All right. And then we're gonna go into the next stitch and put 1 double crochet into that one. And then the next stitch, we're going to put another increase in there. All right. I've done that. And we're going to continue on in this pattern for the remainder of this row, and I'm going to take a pause and I will meet you guys back at the beginning of the next row. Alright, so I'm back at the beginning of my row, and I just have one more stitch to do. And by the end of this row, you should have 36 stitches. If not, might want to rip it back and kind of start again. So what I'm going to do now is join it together with my joining method. You can use a slip stitch. And what I'm going to do now is not go back into the base of this chain. This is another row of increase. So what I'm going to do is go into this next stitch, like right here, and insert my hook and do my double crochet, just 1. So now I technically have 2 double crochets for this row. And what I'm going to do now is make an increase. Okay, and then I am going to make 1 double crochet in the next stitch and 1 double crochet in the next stitch, and then I am going to make another increase. So it's 2 double crochets in the same stitch. Also, I wouldn't mind getting feedback on setup. If anybody has any suggestions, that would be great as well. I recently changed out some lighting in my space, so if everything looks a little bit brighter now, then that's why. I wanted to be able to work with darker colors. Not all the time, but at least sometimes. I enjoy this brown, and it's a good fall/winter color. So I thought that would be good for a chunky hat today. Gonna make a double crochet in the next stitch, and a double crochet in the stitch after that. Then I'm gonna increase again, and this is basically the pattern for this round. So I'm gonna pause and I'm gonna meet you back at the end of the row. Alright, and we are back. I am about to join this row together and finish it off. At the end of row 4, you should have 48 stitches. So basically notice that we're counting in increments of 12. We started off with the 12 double crochet in the center. The next row should be 24 stitches. The third row should be 36, and the one we just finished should be 48. So we're going to do one more row of increases. So what I'm going to do now is go into the next stitch, make a double crochet. Now I have 2, and then I'm going to go into the next stitch. Now I have 3, and then I'm going to go into that next stitch and make 2 double crochets. So I am increasing, and then the next one double crochet, and the next one double crochet, in the third one double crochet, and in that last one we are going to increase, and that is the pattern for this row. So I'm going to pause again, and we are going to meet back up when we get back to the start point. Alright, so now I have my 60 stitches. At the end of this row you should have 60 stitches, and I am going to join my row, the top of this joining method that I use. Okay, and so now from this point on we are going to be working on the length of our hat. This is basically the crown of the head. If you're doing a men's hat, you might want to do an extra row of increase, but for the size today it fits most teenagers and most smaller women's heads. So then again, I do use this pattern for a lot of my male hats, so it just depends on the person that you're making your hat for. And anyway, the length. Most of my normal hats are about 18 rows. So given that we just did 5 rows of increase, we would have 13 more rows. And also due to the nature of the yarn, because it is chunkier and it works up bigger and quicker, it's just a good amount of rows. Now if you want a slouchy hat or a beanie, then I would recommend going to 24 rows to get that effect. But basically what we're going to do is go into each stitch around the hat and just make one double crochet in each of those stitches. So I'm going to do that here, I suppose, on camera. Oof. And another thing I like about chunky yarn is that the projects go by so much quicker. And just to let you guys know, I do have a huge collection of personal hats that I have made over time. So when I am done with this hat, it is going into the giveaway. I don't know if I should call it a bin, but I have several containers full of hats and blankets and scarves to give away this year. I think this is probably my biggest batch yet. I've been doing it for like 3 years. So yeah, each year I've just been able to produce more and more, and that's been super exciting for me. And I actually the other day got to see somebody wearing one of the hats that I made like last year, and that was awesome. That was an awesome feeling. You know, 'tis the season. It's all about giving. And we're going and going. So about this yarn, it was about, I want to say, a 4 or a 5 pack. So I am considering maybe doing a scarf tutorial for that, or I could make a different type of hat tutorial. I am really low on ideas. I am also conceptualizing my setup for when I design my rug. It will be a pattern in the round, a video tutorial in the round. I'm not sure if it will be a written pattern or not. Only time will tell. I'm at the almost end of the semester, so it's crunch time. and I feel like every day has been on hell mode. So we will see. We will see. But that is part of my, I guess, therapy, you could say, is to just sit back and crochet with people and make these videos because I enjoy teaching things to people. I am a math tutor, a volunteer math tutor for adult education. So that's a fun thing. So I guess you can kind of see why crocheting is my thing, because it's nothing but numbers, whether you're thinking about it or not. I'm going to school for art education at the moment, which is fun. And during my observations, I got to teach kindergartners different stuff. So that was really fun. That really lifted my heart, and I enjoy what I do. So thanks for tuning in and letting me do what I love best. And we're almost at the end of this row. And you can see already that by doing this row of just one double crochet in each stitch around, it's already bringing the hat down into that dome shape that you need it to come down in. And I'm sure at the end of the video I will have a photograph of the hat on a mannequin, just because you don't want to really put it on per se if you're going to be giving it away, or at least that's my thing. I don't know if other people are like that. And I have just joined my row subconsciously, and what I'm going to do is do rows 7 through 18 off camera, just doing one double crochet all the way around, and I will meet you guys back here. All right, so I am back, and I am coming in on the last few stitches of the row. So I'm just going to work these up real quick, and then after we finish this row, we are going to fasten off and weave in our end. So just going to work these super fast for you. And so I would say a time estimate on this project would be about 2 hours, maybe at the most. I say that again, being with having my experience, and then also just depends if you're sitting still or not, because sometimes you have to put these projects down and do other stuff, so that's understandable. I'm actually going to close this last row with a slip stitch, and then I'm going to chain my one, and I'm going to cut my yarn. So when you finish this hat, especially if you used your K-hook, it's going to look huge. Now, my hair isn't extremely wild right now. I just took down my braids, so it's relatively tame, but it fits my head perfectly, so I don't know if I just have a big head, but I think that this is perfect. It is definitely the 10 inches across. Just look, eyeballing it. Right now, my tape measure went on vacation. That's fine. And so we're done. It fits a head that's about 20 inches around, I would say. And to finish off this tutorial, I am going to show you guys how to make a pom-pom, but first I am going to take the time to sew in my end, and I will meet you back when it's time to make your pom-pom. Alright, we are back. Now I left my little stitch marker in there. I'm going to go ahead and take that out. No longer need it. And I mean, I didn't say that it was a required material anyway at the beginning, because not everybody needs that visual aid, but you're more than welcome to use those to keep count of your rows, as I did. I only needed one today because I was only doing the 18 rows. And this hat, at least for my head, can be used as a beanie or a slouch. So I think it's cool that it has that dual usage. I'm going to move my little tag out of the way. And I'm going to set this hat to the side. And now I'm going to show you how to make a pom-pom. I have pre-cut my little string here. And I'm just going to have this on standby because you will need it a little later. And so what I'm going to do here is put my yarn between my thumb and my middle finger here. And I'm going to take my working yarn and just start to wrap it around my fingers several times. Some people choose to count their wrapping. I just kind of go with the flow. Sometimes I'll count it, it just depends, but for the most part I just continue wrapping until either I have created a tourniquet around my fingers or I feel that my pom-pom is sufficient. So I'm just gonna keep wrapping here and keep wrapping here. I think I want about a medium-sized pom, nothing too big because the hat is already kind of large. Also, excuse the background noise. I do have a loud family. I think one of the videos before they kind of popped up in the background. Hopefully that's not too audible for you guys though. And I think I am at a good point. I say as I continue to wrap the yarn. I think I am at a good point. So what I'm gonna do is take my yarn off my fingers and I'm just gonna lay it over this little extra piece I have lying here. And what I'm actually gonna do is snip off my working yarn and move it out of the way. And I'm going to tie this extra string right across the middle of this little yarn ball we have made. And I mean, you can do it and move it around as you need to, but it's really important that you tie it across the center, just like that. And it does not hurt at all to double tie it. Now when I double tie mine, I like to go around the other side before I make a knot in it, just to kind of give some added security. So there we go. And as you can see, I left a sufficient amount of tail here just so I can sew my pom-pom in after I get done cutting. So actually what I'm going to do is get my larger scissors from my corner, and what I'm going to do is insert my scissor blade in that hole, and I'm going to start snipping. Now this can be a messy process because the fibers get broken and they kind of go everywhere and scatter, but you can see that that pressure from the center causes everything to split apart after you cut it, and that is basically how you make a pom-pom. I know people look at them and they're like, oh, that's a wonder, but no, they're very simple to make. So just gonna keep doing that until I get there, and be careful not to snip any important strings so that your pom-pom doesn't fall apart. And we're getting there, and we're getting there, and we're getting there. And we now have our pom-pom. So you will notice that you might have a few straggly kind of wild looking strings, and you can just take the time. You can either take your yarn scissors or your big sewing scissors and snip those off. Just keep in mind you will need your long tail. And yeah, so there we go. And then you can also take your small scissors and see, I missed a spot right here. So these are good for finding those little small spots. You want your pom-pom to look as full as possible. So when doing that, you're kind of helping that out. And just make sure you inspect your product. And There we go. I need to get new scissors, but you know what? Right now, it's not a thing that's happening. So after you have kind of flared out your yarn ball and you have found all of your loops, you'll have this nice little fluffy ball. And if you have cats, good luck keeping them away from these. They love these. My cats used to get into my pom-poms a lot, so I never really made a lot of them after a while because, let's face it, cats and string are not a good mixture. So I'm going to bring my hat back, and what I am going to do is get my yarn needle back out, and I am going to thread it. I'm going to thread it. Sorry, I had to pause there. I didn't know if I was honestly recording right now. Would have been a nightmare. Gonna thread this through. And another cool thing, there's so many notions for crocheting. The fray check, but there's also these yarn threading things that you can use. But really, I just make sure that my tip of my yarn is quote unquote sharp, like you would with a regular sewing needle. I don't know how to explain that. But, alright. So, I'm going to put my hand in my hat now. And I like to put my yarn needle straight through the center of the magic circle, just like so. And I pull it through from the inside, just to secure it there. I want it nice and centered. That's just me. You can have it secured however. And now that I have that pulled through, I'm going to flip my hat inside out. And I am going to go into the bottom part of these double crochets from round 1. And I am just going to kind of work my needle in there, sewing it around and securing it in. Now for this part, I might use my fray check if it is near and handy, just to make sure that nothing comes wiggling loose. Just gonna pull that nice and snug, because again, this particular yarn, the fibers aren't as, how do you want to say that? Like with wool, the fibers are clingy, and so they kind of link together and they stay together, as opposed to acrylic. Acrylic is easier to work, in my opinion, especially for the beginners, because you can easily take it down, like rip it back if you mess up your project. Wool, on the other hand, is very like not forgiving, but it's a wonderful fiber to work with. I kind of am building a preference for working with wool just because it feels so nice afterwards. It's like, oh my gosh, this wonder, this two-edged sword you're met with when it comes to choosing materials, but that's up to you. I think I made a post earlier in the month or in late October, and I was showing you all how I messed up a patch for one of my panels on my sweater that I'm making, and yeah, fortunately I had yarn. I'm gonna have to order more though to complete it, but it's well worth it. So I'm just going around the center more than once, obviously, just making sure it's good and in there. I don't want it wiggling loose or apart. And yeah. So once you've determined that, once you've determined that you have woven in your yarn as much as you needed to, you can use all kinds of fastening techniques. I'm just gonna kind of tie this in because my fray check also took a vacation. You know what it is with my supplies taking vacations. And I'm gonna do it just one more time. that in. Now, if you're paranoid like me, you can get your frayed check if you have it handy and put a little dab over that knot, but I probably will later off camera. And what we will do now is turn it back on the right side. And we now have this pom secured on our hats. And that concludes today's tutorial. So I thank you guys for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's tutorial, I ask that you go down, give me a big thumbs up, subscribe, and check out my other social media to stay up to date. Happy making!